We'll jump to the third question on the sheet. I don't know if you all did it, and so I'm not going to push you all for an answer, but I will ask, for those of you who read ahead, was there any one of these proverbs on this sheet that stood out? You don't have to share if you have one. Actually, that's what we'll go with. You're just not comfortable to share, so that way there's no pressure. If there's someone who's eager to share one, because I've got mine, and we'll jump into that, but I figured I would start with that as a jumping off point. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, let's look at 13:12 then. It says, hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a desire fulfilled is a tree of life. It ends up on a lovely note. When I was going through this and looked at that one, I was focusing on the first part, which maybe shows a difference of personality or something. But let's talk about that for a minute. John, you point out you liked it because it has this kind of positive idea of a desire fulfilled. Is like a tree of life, this like beautiful thing. And I think that this contrast is interesting, right? That we have the idea of like what you hope for and whether or not you attain it or not. What do you think the lesson is from this, though? Because we recognize, okay, hope deferred, hope that's not fulfilled maybe is a way to put that, makes you heart sick. But when it is fulfilled, it's this wonderful thing. What does that make you think? What's a lesson in that, you think? Yeah, I mean, if we just think about this practically, if you ever like set your eyes on something that you want, and you're like, I'm going to get this, and you work really hard for it, and then for whatever reason you don't achieve it or have it, and like the feeling that comes with that. There's this song I'm trying to learn on the guitar, and it's really hard, and I'm this close to giving up. Like I'm so close. I've been working on it for months. I'm so close to giving up on it. And the thought of giving up on it and not being able to achieve it is heartbreaking, right? Because I've put a lot of work into it. I can only play like the first 2 bars. Like it's not like I can play very much of it. But it's so hard. So then it's like, now I haven't achieved. I've wasted all this time. The other things I could have done, the things I could have hoped for, the things I could have attained. And that's, again, like a small example of this idea, right? As opposed to something that you have worked for and dreamt about, and then you have achieved it and you have it, and it's wonderful because you've earned it. We talk about that in economics, right? Delaying gratification. That idea that you've delayed gratification, you've put this off, and now you get to reap the rewards of all that effort. You save up for retirement. You put your money away every month. You eat ramen noodles for a decade, to save your money so that you can retire. And then finally you get there. And it's like, now I get to enjoy the reward of my, suffering or whatever. I mean, I think that that's along the lines here, and I don't know that it has to be that sort of physical sort of thing, but that's a tangible example of this idea about a desire being fulfilled and how it's this wonderful thing that grows and is hopeful. And I think part of the lesson in this is to provide some context and wisdom for the things we set our heart on. There are people who set their sights on things that they're never going to achieve. I've mentioned this before. If I had made it my life's goal to be an NBA player, I would have been depressed for a long time, right? If I just worked that hard, if I just work hard enough, right? My hands are too small. I have smaller hands by an inch than the smallest hands in the history of the NBA. So there is a very clear metric that proves it's impossible for me to be an NBA player, right? So if you set your sight on that and you dedicate your life to it, and then you get cut, and then you make it to this level and you fight through it, and then you get cut again, and then you realize, I can't do it. And that's your life's mission. You have this heart sick sort of problem. You've created this anxiety because you weren't realistic from the beginning of what you could have done. Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I think that's part of it. When you're a kid, when I was a kid, it was you can do anything you set your mind to. You want to be an astronaut, you can be an astronaut. And it's like, well, maybe not, right? Like, maybe I can't. Like, I get motion sick. Is that something you can work through? Like, I don't know, maybe if I like get in the 0G thing and like spin around fat, maybe eventually I don't get motion sick and I could like, I don't really know that that's the case. And I don't think you can be an astronaut that takes Dramamine, like I don't know that that's part of it. So it's like this idea about being realistic and thoughtful and pragmatic about it. I think that's part of it. But I also think it's about making sure that you recognize the things that you can gain and the benefits of that too. It isn't just this negative, like beat you down, you can't do these things. It is about hope, and it is about goals, and it is about promise, and it's about achieving those things. And of course, within the book of Proverbs, it's much less about becoming an astronaut or an NBA player or learning some song on the guitar, right? This is much more about life, and more specifically, the things we can achieve through God. And so, something that is very achievable through God, that is promised to us through God, is eternal life. Right? So like there is this idea of hope that in biblical terms we always put in the context of heaven and being able to achieve that. And so this idea of hope deferred, making the heart sick, you're not going to achieve it, you haven't achieved it, the problems and consequences of that, versus a desire fulfilled, the desire of being with God, the desire of resurrection and these things. Like that is something that can be fulfilled. You can cling to that has this wonderful benefit. Maybe that's part of that. I don't know. Sandy, comment? Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, I think that's really well said because it shows both sides of this, right? It isn't that it's one or the other. Both exist within our lives. And I think emphasizing on the second part and the tree of life and the hopeful kind of blossoming idea of this big, beautiful thing that's of life, right? And that flourishes, I think is a big part of that. When I was looking at these Proverbs, 5 of them, 1, 2, 3, 4 of them, kind of stuck out to me. And so we'll read these 4 and talk about them. So the first one is Proverbs 12:25. It says, anxiety in a man's heart weighs him down, but a good word makes him glad. In Proverbs 15:13, it says, a glad heart makes a cheerful face, but by sorrow of heart the spirit is crushed. Proverbs 17:22 says, a joyful heart is good medicine, but a crushed spirit dries up the bones. And the last one was 18:14, which is, a man's spirit will endure sickness, but a crushed spirit who can bear. And the reason why these 4 stand out to me, we go back and look at these more specifically in a second, is that each one of them has this contrast between anxiety and joy, essentially. But if I'm not mistaken, the language attributed to the anxiety, the crushed spirit, whatever, is way heavier than the positive thing that it's paired with. Like, for instance, the one we just read, 18:14, a man's spirit will endure sickness, but a crushed spirit who can bear? Like, you make it through like physical ailment, but when your spirit is crushed, who can handle that? Right? Or you go back to 12:25, the weight of anxiety. Yeah, a good word can cheer you up, but it's like an anxious heart, like it weighs you down, right? Like there's something like dragging you down. Proverbs 15:13, again, this idea that a glad heart makes a cheerful face, like your face is smiling, you have this glad heart, you show it on the outside, but by sorrow of heart, the spirit is crushed. Like a cheerful face and a spirit being crushed, those don't seem like on the same level to me, right? And then the other one, 17:22, joy and affliction. The affliction kind of seems more dramatic. And that's interesting to me. First of all, anybody disagree in the way that those are paired, or wanted to talk about that. So if the crushed spirit that you feel in your bones is a little bit more dramatic, what do we make of that? Any thoughts? Yeah. Yeah, and I don't, you're absolutely right. Like, it's so easy to be pessimistic about everything. I mean, I kind of made the joke coming in about, parents always say, oh, you're going to miss those days? And it's like, well, yeah, I will in general, but I'm sure there are certain things that I won't miss, right? Like you can't tell me that I'm going to miss my kids having to go to the bathroom every 10 minutes. Like you can't, I don't know, maybe. But it's like, so it's easy to be pessimistic in those moments, right? But that's to kind of take over. But I think it's more than that a little bit too. I think that there is this real danger to anxiety, if you want to use that word, or to a crushed spirit, or to the crippling weight of sadness that we can feel, depression, whatever it is. And I think we all experience that in some way or other in our lives. Certainly some have faced it more than others based on the hardships that we've gone through or the circumstances that we've been in. But like that weight that you feel that it describes, the weight that drags you down, or the crushed spirit that you feel down to your very bones, like certainly that is something that is powerful and prohibitive to action, right? You get that feeling and you don't want to do anything, and it's crippling. And all you want to do is like lie down in the middle of the floor and do nothing, right? And there's a weight to get up. There's like something's lying on top of you, right? And you have to find a way to do something. Like there's something that's true about this crushed spirit terminology that the Proverbs are articulating, right? That like there is this kind of anxious problem that exists. And it's crippling. I mean, have you ever soared as high because of joy equally to how much you've sunk down due to the anxious weight of a crushed spirit? Maybe, I don't know. Maybe that's unfair to parallel them like that. But it seems like in your most joyous moments you may do something, but how long does that carry you? Whereas a crushed spirit, how long does that sit with you? And so it's fascinating to me that we look at these Proverbs and we get these 4 examples of these Proverbs where we see this kind of like acknowledgement of the crushed spirit. Yeah.
Would you rather have a glad word, or would you rather have your soul hurt? Which one would you rather have? And life doesn't work that way. It's not like you wake up in the morning and you're like, oh hey, I think I'll go for the crushed spirit. But your mindset allows you to walk down that path over a period of time, and you do fall off the cliff. And I don't know anybody that hasn't happened to depression. I don't know many people that want to talk about it personally. But I do understand that it's that the abyss you fall into. It's not something that just happens and then it's gone. It roams on day after day after day, and slowly drags you down into the abyss. And you would do better to cut whatever that is off and live without it than to sin.
I think that's exactly right. And so I think that goes to the first question that was on the sheet. Is anxiety bad? Like the feeling of anxiety, which is a little different than the crushed spirit maybe, because that's maybe speaks a little more to depression or some of those other things. But just in kind of this context maybe, is anxiety, like when you feel anxiety, is that a bad thing? Is that a sign that your faith is weak, or that there's that's a bad thing? I would say no, right? Like the anxiety isn't bad. The cause of the anxiety is the problem. Like when you feel the anxiety and the gripping of your chest because you have this kind of anxious knot that's weighing you down, that's the alarm bell. That's telling you that's your body telling you that there's something wrong. The problem is the thing that's causing it. And I think what you're saying, Michael, is right, that these Proverbs are articulating pretty well the danger of the crushed spirit and the way that weighs you down. And so, as a Christian then, it isn't that the anxiety or the crushed spirit is a sinful thing. It's the indication of a problem that needs to be corrected. And you need to find a way to back up and start addressing the things that have led you down that path. And I know that that's not easy, and I'm not trying to provide psychiatric help, but this is the pragmatic sort of big picture idea that I think the Bible teaches. Yeah, Derek.
Two things. The first is, I've heard it said for maybe folks that are suffering from diagnosis of cancer or such, serious diagnosis, that the attitude is everything. If the patient remains positive and being hopeful, that has a huge impact on their ability to be successful in the treatments, as opposed to being downtrodden. Life's coming to an end, it's all over, I'm going to die, that kind of thing. So it does seem to be that there is something to having a hopeful spirit, the attitude that we choose to have. The other thing is, in our own personal lives, if we allow anxiety to variants of deep within us, we're all going to end up at the doctor, probably on blood pressure medicine, heart medicine, and it will kill us.
Right.
So, true, real life situations that this seems to be bringing to the surface that we need to be able to deal with these things.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, there's all sorts of evidence about being in a toxic marriage in which somebody is abusive verbally or emotionally, that the person who's being abused actually gets sick more often, that their immune system there's a physiological response, stress and the effects on blood pressure and hormone levels and all sorts of things causing illnesses, right? Like there's all those sorts of things. And so I think that that's right. And so we recognize that this high problem of anxiety, depression, crushed spirit is a bad thing and has these negative consequences. And we recognize that the way to challenge that is to be hopeful, right? That we have a positive mindset and all those things. So the question is, how do you become hopeful practically? How do you cling to that? And how do you cling to that specifically when there's all sorts of reasons to not be hopeful? How do you reset your mind, right, to have the right perspective, as opposed to falling down the path of oblivion and weighed down by anxiety and a crushed spirit? Like that's the real question at the heart, right? Because we recognize the positive mindset's the good thing, this negative mindset's the bad thing, and the way to correct the negative mindset is to have the positive mindset, but easier said than done, right? So how do you reset that? Like what is the key to all this? And maybe while you're thinking about that, there's this Proverbs 14:10, which is another one of the ones that I thought was interesting, where it says, the heart knows its own bitterness, and no stranger shares its joy. And it seems to be this idea that like the bitterness of loneliness and anxiety, like that some of you bear alone. Job, for instance, said to his friends in Job 19:21, have pity on me, my friends, have pity, for the hand of God has struck me. But he also acknowledges in Job 6:15, my brothers are as undependable as intermittent streams, right? Like he wants pity, he wants mercy, all these things, but he recognizes that they don't understand, and they're not offering that to him. And so like there's this sense in which this pain, whatever, is this lonesome thing. So maybe another sort of coin to toss in the fountain. I don't think that makes sense. Another sort of thing to think about in this context, right? So how do we reset our minds? How do we redirect? How do we refocus, reshape, have the right perspective? Yeah.
Looking at chapter 15, verse 30, the light of the eyes rejoices the heart, and the report makes the tongue smile. It seems that light may be referring to the sun, and the hope that comes through the sun, and what the sun tells us about our future, and the hope that is there. The sun rises every day. And without the sun, life will die. There's hope. And it seems to me that certainly the light is what we need, and the light is God. God is the answer to help us work through these moments of time in our lives. Everyone has difficult days. choices that we make and how we want to handle that are the impactful pieces of all of this. That's these answers. And all of us choose to do things differently. The question is what do we put first? What do we put there in place of it that's going to draw our attention away from the anxieties into where we're focused?
Psalm 13, I think, is a interesting psalm in this context, right? It says, it's a shorter psalm, but it says, "How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I take counsel in my soul and have sorrow in my heart all day? How long shall my enemy be exalted over me?" And so, like, this prayer here, right, the way this psalm starts, I think encapsulates, at least to some extent, this crushed spirit sort of attitude, right? In which we recognize, okay, I need to pray to God because He is the answer to these problems. And yet, when you approach God, your feeling is, why haven't you done anything about this? Which is a very real feeling, right? And yet, the important thing is that it was still addressed to God. But it's also important to note that as this psalm goes on, notice what happens. He says in verse 3, "Consider and answer me, O Lord my God. Light up my eyes, lest I sleep the sleep of death. Lest my enemy say I've prevailed over him. Lest my foes rejoice because I'm shaken." He's like reiterating the request. And then he says, "But I have trusted in your steadfast love. My heart shall rejoice in your salvation. I will sing to the Lord because He has dealt bountifully with me." That's it. And it's amazing, isn't it? And this is just one 6-verse example of this, but there are so many psalms that follow this pattern, right? Where it's, "How long, O Lord? These terrible things are happening. Are you going to let them happen forever?" And then somehow in the end, it's, "I will sing to the Lord because He's dealt bountifully with me." And so I think what Derek's talking about is this process of perspective that we were talking about earlier. And the benefit of prayer and the benefit of being a Christian and the benefit of having God as our God is the ability to reset our perspective, right? And again, everything is easier said than done. But in the darkest moments, what truth can you cling to that God has given us? That death isn't even the end. That whatever darkness we feel, it's not the end because He's blessed us more than we ever could have deserved or hoped or promised for at all. That there's this perspective change that takes place, right? That no matter how bad it gets, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, right? Like there is this hope, there is this promise, there is this thing that is going to make it all okay. And so, I think, we talk about anxiety, we talk about these things. Philippians 4 obviously comes to our minds, right? Philippians 4:4, "Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I would say rejoice. Let your reasonableness be known to everyone that the Lord is at hand. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." It's a pretty big promise that Paul writes in this letter and sends to the Philippians. That's a pretty big promise. He doesn't say, and hope that God will do these things. He says, no, don't be anxious, but by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And his response is, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understandings, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. That's a pretty big promise. It's a pretty big promise. I will ask this, and maybe this is dangerous, but I want an honest answer. And maybe you aren't comfortable giving an honest answer in front of everybody, and so maybe that's unfair. I'll tell you what, before I ask the question, I will tell you a very honest story. That way you will feel more comfortable to be honest to answer the question. Just a couple weeks ago, I've lost my job, and a lot of downtime, right? A lot of time applying for jobs, a lot of time trying to network for people. Those of you who have gone through this have mentioned to me how hard it can be. And there are moments where you're home by yourself where it's pretty rough, right? The feeling of rejection, why me? Why was I the one that was let go as opposed to the other people within the team? What am I going to do if I can't find a job? You know, you go through those processes, you look at your finances, you see these things, and it can be crippling, right? And I was reading Psalm 27, and in verse 13 it says, surely the goodness of God will find me in the land of the living. And I read that, and I thought, I wish I had that guarantee. Because this is the Old Testament, right? This is the blessings and the cursings of the law. That's, yeah, sure. God will bless your land and all these things. I get my grace is sufficient for you. And it's like, look, I understand that's great. I understand that's wonderful. But that doesn't pay the bills this week, right? So, you know, you get a little frustrated. You start thinking about it. You're praying about it. You're going through all the theological arguments about how God operates within the world and providence and what he guarantees and what he doesn't guarantee and all the bad things you know that have happened, but all the good things that have happened, trying to parse through, like, how do I understand this, right? And then you pray about it. Then you feel guilty that you thought all those things. And you say the how long, oh Lord, sorts of prayers. And I felt better. So the question I was going to ask, have any of you ever put this to the test? This be anxious for nothing, but by everything in prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God, and the peace of God will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. Have any of you ever put this to the test and not had it granted? Not had the peace of God granted to you in response? And I don't mean magically right away, because our emotions aren't that fickle. Well, sometimes they are, I guess. But have any of you found that to not be true? And I want to know that because as a preacher and as a teacher and somebody who wants to help people, I want to be able to help them, right? And I want to be able to articulate things in a way that is helpful. And I've found this to be true in my own life. And the moments where you're on the ground and you don't want to get up. You don't want to do anything. You know, the last thing you want to do is get up. And somehow you pray, somehow you get up and you do something and you go about your day and you find this peace. And maybe it doesn't last forever, right? You'll have another down moment. But I think this is important because this goes back to these proverbs and this problem we're talking about anxiety and joy and the perspective question, right? Like, what is our perspective and what are we pursuing and what is our mindset and what do we believe, right? At the end of it all, what is true? What do you cling to? And the most dangerous thing is when you give up on something that's true, right? Because if you stop believing in something that is true, like the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, then the crushed spirit really weighs you down because now you don't have Philippians 4, you don't have the peace of God, you don't have these things that are the answer to that problem. But if you have that, right, if you have this perspective on God, if you have this peace of God, if you have this prayer, if you have this approach to him and you follow all the things, part of that, I think, is you recognize what you have to do. That some things are right and some things are wrong. And you've developed the character or trying to develop the character where you're going to do the thing that's right. Even if it's hard. It's like my dad. If he's going out of town for a little bit of time, he has to mow the grass before he leaves. He has to. Me, I'll wait till I get a note on the door telling me I've got to mow the grass, right? Like it's shameful. Don't drive by my house. I'll be embarrassed. I need to mow the grass right now. In fact, I was just thinking today, I got to do the yard work tomorrow, right? But there are certain habits and certain things that people develop that are just things that they have to do. And my dad, in his sense of duty, there are some things that he has to do. And one of them is he has to mow the grass before he goes out of town. And if he doesn't, it drives him nuts. Like the whole time. Like even if it doesn't rain, he's like, I bet it was raining, grass isn't mowed. It's like, Dad, nobody cares. But that's like some rule in his mind that has to be followed, right? Like that's like a habit that's been created, this mindset. And I think part of Christianity is that it creates these habits, this mindset of right and wrong, to where there's some things we just won't allow ourselves to do. We will get up and do the things that have to be done. And I think that's part of the defense mechanism against this crushed spirit that weighs you down is that you are still doing something, that you have to get up and move, because the worst thing you can do is to just be weighed down. The worst thing you can do is just give up, right? And it's like every one of those moments is like a test as to how hard you're willing to fight. And every time you get back up, it proves something to you, and it proves something to God about who you are, and it's character building. And I think at some level, that's part of this. And so, yeah, you still pray. You're still going back to God even when you want to blame God. But that's where you go back, because that's what you've got. That's the truth you're clinging to. The truth of God, the truth of Jesus' resurrection. And that's the thing that makes the difference. We're getting a little bit far afield from the Proverbs, maybe. But hopefully that's helpful. I mean, comments, questions, thoughts about this? Yeah. I don't want to have to answer a bunch of questions about whatever's going through. I thought about telling you all I'm not going to shave till I have an interview. So as long as I'm unshaved, you know that I haven't had a job interview. That way you don't have to ask. But I'm not going to do that. I plan on shaving. I hate growing my facial hair. So I plan on shaving Sunday. But like there's that sense, right, where you don't have to answer the question. You don't have to, as opposed to like allowing yourself, even though it may be tedious to answer the same question 12 times, to like be comforted by people that care, that like legitimately care and want to know and want to help. And it's like we put up this wall to prevent people from comforting us because we want to grip the crushed spirit, which is the weirdest part, right? For any of you who have dealt with anxiety or depression or any of that, like that's the weirdest part, isn't it? That like you want to be sad. And you have to like convince yourself that that's not a good thing. Like it somehow grabs you and you want to be miserable. You want to justify the misery somehow. As opposed to allowing people to comfort you and to help you. And that's part of the kind of toxic spiral that can exist here.
Understand you have joy and you have anxiety. These are two extreme opposites. We sometimes talk about bipolar. Some people have biochemical issues of depression, and it can get very complicated. And so I do think that for the general purpose of general audience, these proverbs help us. But if someone finds themselves in a situation where there's not a lot of things going on, then you have to maybe have a medical situation. There are times and places for that.
Right, certainly. I'm not a licensed psychiatrist, don't know anything about brain chemistry and the drugs that are, given to that. I can't speak to any of those things. And so we are talking outside the realm of some sort of biochemical professional help needing sort of situation. I think that's...
The reason I bring it up is that there's sometimes a too simplistic response by some Christians that say, well, that's not a problem. All you have to do is pray about it. And I do agree that prayer is very powerful. But we would never say that if someone had cardiomyopathy or some other kind of physical ailment of their heart, we wouldn't say just pray about it and not go to the doctor. We would say, yes, pray about it, but also go to the doctor. So there's a time and place for these other things too, is all I'm saying.
Right. Yep.
We sometimes, like you were saying, I don't have the analysis of all the biochemistry, I'm not an expert in this field, and sometimes we need to acknowledge that, and if someone needs professional help, we say maybe you should do that. It's not always easy to find the right person because, again, there's a wide variety of divergence in kinds of interventions that are suggested. I'm just saying there's time and place for that.
Yeah. I think that's well said. Important caveat. Kind of jumping back, it's interesting to your point as well. Proverbs 25:20 alludes to ill-timed sort of advice or misunderstanding of circumstances, perhaps, because it says in Proverbs 25:20, whoever sings songs to a heavy heart is like one who takes off a garment on a cold day and like vinegar on soda. Like you think that you're helping somebody by going and like cracking a joke in front of them because they're sad and you're going to fix their problem, and it's disrespectful to it's like taking your clothes off when it's cold outside. Probably not the best idea, right? Not the right approach. And so I think the Proverbs do kind of address the kind of foolhardy nature that we can have in trying to go and comfort somebody in the wrong way and the sort of wisdom involved in that. But it also offers, on the other side of that as well, and we looked at this proverb already, and kind of the anxiety being the heavier of the two in the couplet here. But in Proverbs 12:25, it does offer as well, anxiety in a man's heart weighs him down, but a good word makes him glad. That there is an opportunity for goodness to creep in, right? Even in the anxiety that a man has in his heart, that there's the good word, the right thing can still have a profound impact there. And so I say all that, towards the end here to kind of couch all this conversation as someone who wants to help somebody, right? Like recognize the circumstances and what you can or cannot do. May not be the right person to speak to somebody right now, right? If you have, I'm trying to name an example that hopefully this is fair, but it's like if you have like a really healthy kid and you find out that your brother has an autistic kid, and you go up to him like, oh, it's fine, kids are fine, and you start talking about your kid and how great they are and how they're going to be okay, probably not the right time, right? Like probably not the right way to approach that. And I think that that's part of the wisdom of these things, as opposed to somebody who has raised a kid with autism and goes to him and says, look, these are some of the challenges I faced, but these are some of the benefits as well. There's a way to do that too. Of course, you don't want to be demeaning and act like you have all the answers and that it's not a big deal or anything like that. There's a wisdom to this, right? But I think it's important to note the way these Proverbs talk about both sides of that, the way a good word can bring joy to someone with a heavy heart, but also knowing the time and the place about that too. It's interesting to me as you go through all these and look at these Proverbs, the way it addresses a very real problem that exists. And it's easy to say, go to the Sermon on the Mount and talk about anxiety and worry and do not worry and look at those things and be demeaning or downplay the sort of anxiety that can exist. But I think you also have to acknowledge the way that can be a misunderstanding of the comfort that those passages also provide. God doesn't guarantee an easy life, quite the contrary. But he does promise salvation, and he does promise his care and his love. And I think, I mentioned this the other night when we were at the Shearer's house, but I think the story of Job, is a helpful kind of way of articulating all this, right? Job loses everything, and he's upset about it. And he's protesting his innocence. I didn't deserve this. And his friends are like, well, no, you clearly deserve it because it happened. And they go back and forth for a long time. And, we always talk about the patience of Job. My granddad always said Job wasn't patient. He was just stubborn. He was just stubborn. Which I think is probably a little bit true. But anyway, so you go through all that, and then God speaks, and he puts everybody in their place. particularly Job's friends. He's a little bit kinder to Job, but he puts everybody in their place. And then what does he do? He blesses Job. He basically says, you all don't know anything that you're talking about. You've gotten it all wrong. And then what does he do? He restores everything that Job had and blessed him and took care of him anyway. And I think that's a pretty kind of marvelous example of the character of God. Like, we want to understand so many things, and we want to pray about them and have the answers and have the solutions, and we want to be able to articulate it. I mean, I particularly feel that way. I want to be able to explain very clearly and articulate very specifically how providence works. Like, I spend an inordinate amount of time trying to figure out how from the Bible to articulate providence. And I usually wind up having to acknowledge that I'm never going to understand it, and that I'm probably not supposed to, but I still keep trying to figure it out. And I think that that's kind of the point. You may not always understand. You may not always know why things are happening and what the outcome will be, but God will take care of you anyway. And I think that that's part of the lesson here. And so we started in Proverbs. We branched out a little bit. Hopefully that's of some benefit to you all and is interesting at the very least. But appreciate your comments and attention tonight. And then luckily I don't have to teach next week, because I'm really worried about which one of my problems I'd have to deal with next week in front of you all. But we're done for now. So thank you all.